Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Grace Under Pressure. Today's a little bit different because I don't have a guest per se. We had one, but due to some complications, he wasn't able to join us today, but he will in the future. Those of you who know the show that Grace Under Pressure focuses on how leaders keep it real in times of stress. So I've got some interesting information today that I want to share with you. Let's get right into it. I have long used the Edelman organization and their data as a resource. And they've come out with a new trust survey for 2020. And this particular one is a special report on trust and corona. And it's got data from around the world. And let me share you a few highlights. And after we go through the highlights, we'll talk about, I'll share some interesting perspectives that I have about grace. So let's get started, shall we? Okay. It's the 2020 report. Okay. Those that were surveyed said it's time for business and employers to step up. 78% are looking for businesses to ensure their employees are protected, no surprise. And 63% would like their employees to be more open, okay, about what's going on. And then a country will not make it through without brands. That is the customer, the products we buy. We need the support of companies we patronize to also get involved. So it's not just our employers, but it's the companies we patronize through our purchase power. Okay. Sadly, just about half of those surveyed said that we're doing very well, and businesses are doing very well in keeping us safe. Actually, they're not keeping us safe. That's what half the people say. When it comes to CEOs, only 1/3 of the CEOs, or actually less than that, are doing an outstanding job during the pandemic. And we'll talk about reasons for that later on. So this is the data. Curiously, although we are failing a little bit in the individual response to trust, believe it or not, trust in organizations and trust in government, I should say, is risen. And it's gone up 6 points since January. Okay, and I think that's got to do with the health reporting from, at least here in the United States, the CDC and FDA. 70%, nearly 70% believe there will be a second wave of coronavirus in my country. 88%, if you look at the high, that's almost more than 80% believe that in Korea, whereas we in the US, only about 2/3 believe there'll be a second wave. So that's interesting data. People are still scared and do not trust the time to resume normal activities. So that's not good for retail and restaurants, but it may be good for us keeping safe, okay? Globally, people are containing themselves to their immediate surroundings. For example, in the countries that were surveyed, 25%, only 25% will go on a bus, only about the same will stay in a hotel, but jumps down to look at air travel, only 15%. Curiously, traveling by plane is far safer coronavirus risk-wise than an airplane. The airlines are doing a good job of a screening, but also keeping distancing. And the air within an airliner is exchanged at a high, rapid rate. And that ensures ample circulation. Returning to the workplace, only half of employees feel safe to going back to work, okay? 62% do in India, whereas 54% do in Germany. In the US, we're down to 21%. So excuse me, I got that wrong. In India, it's 1/3 feel more safe going back, only 1/4 in Germany, and for the US, it's 21%. Curiously, in France, it's almost half, 40% feel it's okay to go back to work. So we can see that perceptions change from country to country. There's no consensus on the authority for workplace decisions. 22% say the health authorities should make the decision, whereas 14% say it should be CEOs and themselves, whereas about the same percentage, 18%, feel that the workers themselves should make that decision about whether it's safe to go back to work. And what employees are looking for is precautions. Okay, mandatory use of masks, yes. Nearly 60% want that. Maintaining social distancing or physical distancing, that's almost the same. Reduced occupancy in the workplace, very important. So that's a good point. When we actually do go back to work, and I believe that we'll have a kind of hybrid where some of us will work from our home location and some of us will work in the office, but it will be fewer numbers in the office. So we're going to be experiencing this pandemic for quite some time. And also, they're all non-essential travel. Only 40% want to believe in, 40% want to limit non-essential travel. Sadly, at least here in the States, there's a political divide on mask wearing and going back to the office. Nearly 40% of Republicans think it's important, whereas 83% of Democrats do. And it goes back to things like plastic shields. Republicans are less enthusiastic about it, but the same as the Democrats. Social distancing, Republicans and Democrats are about the same. So the big divide is on masks, and I think we see it on our everyday life. Sadly, something like a health precaution, such as wearing a mask, has taken on political ramifications, and that's silly, in my opinion. Okay. However, right now, employees kind of feel safe where they are, and that's probably some maybe in an office and feel safe, but 74% who are at home feel safe. And importantly about that, they feel safe, but also they don't feel that staying home will negatively impact their career. So this is interesting data, and I wanted to share it with you because it's a top of mind issue, and it gets to the point of where are we right now, and what do we do next? So, excuse me, I'm trying to stop the screen. Okay, so what do we do about it? Well, trust is essential. There is no leadership without trust. And I've done a lot of work in trust. I've written about it extensively. I've also spoken about it. And I want to share with you some highlights of a presentation that I've shared many times before about what trust is. So let's. Okay, great. And by the way, I want to apologize for keeping this in a kind of an edit mode. The reason I do that is if I go full screen, I lose complete control of the slides. So I'm in a semi-edit mode, if you will. So let's start with a little laughter. We have an exciting future ahead of us, right, guys? And we see a workforce, this is pre-pandemic, of course, which is not exactly engaged. And that raises the whole issue right now is how does a leader keep his or her team engaged? And that's a big balancing act. So that's what we're going to talk about. So. Okay, a friend of mine, Jessie Lynn Stoner, whom you met a couple of weeks ago on this show, has created a trust map, which is a macro picture on how to begin to instill trust and make it a value. And Jessie talks about step number 1, share a vision. We're all in this together. And boy, does that sum up where we are now. 2, honestly describe the current reality. And I think what we just saw in the data from Edelman is not everybody feels confident that they're getting the straight scoop. It's as few as half at times feel that they're not getting it. Next step is people want clarity. We are in a time of great ambiguity right now. So where do we go next? That's a big issue. And so companies, it's incumbent upon companies and organizations to let people know where they're going. And step 4, communicate, 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 and involve, involve, involve. And lastly, when people know where they're going, what's expected of them, then they are ready to make a commitment to where they're going to go. So here's some data from the great book by The Speed of Trust by Stephen M.R. Covey. And he talked about trust and the speed of trust in his book, which I've used many times. It's a wonderful resource. And there's a myth that trust is the soft stuff, the slow stuff. You can't teach it. It's either or. In other words, you either have it or you don't, or it's a risky proposition. Well, the reality is that trust is quantifiable, and there are many, many surveys that show that. And we just saw one example with the trust survey by Edelman on the coronavirus. Speed of trust can be fast when management gets to it. It's based on character, the leader's character, and those who commit to it. It can be created at the same time. It can be destroyed. And when there's no trust, it's a costly enterprise. Ways of trust. There's self-trust, relationship trust, organizational trust, market trust, and societal trust. And as if we think of where we are right now with our pandemic, all of those levels of trust are playing into the situation because we're all So we're all going through different things at different times, and it's affecting us personally and a team as well as organizationally. Okay. The next slide is okay, building trust. I'll make this a little bit bigger. I'm sorry. Okay. We can't really see it, but there's elements of trust. My apologies. It talks about what teams are looking for when it comes to trust. And it's things like respect and collegiality. Do I have one another's back and things like that? My apologies for that. This slide is not legible. Okay. So when we think of trust, what's a leader to do? Well, first of all, is be open and transparent. Keep people in the loop. Let them know what's going on. And in our ambiguous times, this is the time to be totally transparent. Share the information that you know. And that way people, at least you're straight with them. Now, we all want reassurance. We all want to be told things will be fine. Well, it's not always possible, certainly not now. But you can be open and honest about what you do know. Hold yourself, most importantly, and others accountable. Accountability is the watchword of trust. When there's no accountability, that is, if people feel they can get away with anything, well, then they will. That's as simple as that. But it's up to the boss, that's the leader, to set the standard for what's accountable and how accountability really works. Demonstrate that you're understanding. I think this is really important in a ways that it never has been before. I talk a lot about, and you've heard it in these shows, about how leaders need to reach out and connect with their people. And reach out on a personal level on work issues, certainly, but also check in with them. How are you doing? Listen to their tone of voice, or hopefully on Zoom chats or whatever form of video chat there is. Read their body language. How are they? Are they engaged? Are they? How motivated do you think they are? And I think right now we're in this situation where we're all getting pretty tired of this pandemic, and rightly so, because it's been going on for, as we speak today, at least 6 months, and we have probably another 6 months to go. Hopefully we'll have some improvements along this way, but we're not going back to the way we were in January 2020. So leaders need to be attuned to that so that they can bring people along. And understanding is so critical right now. Here's a little thing from Stephen M. R. Covey's book, Speed of Trust. You see trust, you speak trust, and you behave in that manner. In other words, what does this mean? What are my examples? I see a positive behavior, trust, accountability. I speak about accountability, and I hold myself accountable. All of these three things, I see it, I speak it, and I behave it. Each reinforces the other. And on the opposite works, if I see lack of accountability, I will speak about lack of accountability and I will behave accordingly. I may hold myself accountable, but here's the problem. I will think that accountability doesn't matter. So what's the point? Okay. Here's something I talk about, building trust, and it builds to a collaboration. And there's three elements to it. You have to have an open mind, an open heart, and an open work environment. So what does an open mind mean? It means that you're able to think big. You're able to share your ideas with others. That's where transparency comes in. Do I feel safe to speak my mind? Amy Edmondson of Harvard, who's written extensively about the psychological safety. This is where psychological safety comes involved. You have to have a kind of safety before people feel that they can speak up. If they feel where they raise an idea that might be different from the boss and they're shot down for that idea, I don't think they're going to be raising that idea again. So open-mindedness is essential. Then we come to the concept of open-heartedness. That's humility, it's courtesy and kindness. And those of you who have watched the show know that Grace Under Pressure, we focus on humility, on how we treat one another and the kindness we show. Grace in so many ways is intended kindness directed toward individuals and groups. So open minds, open hearts. And we get to the work, which is share your ideas. What is at stake? Can I feel that I can bring other people to me? Again, psychological safety comes in. Do I feel secure that I can raise ideas? Do I feel secure that I can share ideas? Do I feel that I can challenge the status quo? And when I do feel that, then I'm going to feel more open and more ready to work collaboratively. But it takes that open mind, an open heart, and an open work spirit. And it's up to leaders to model these behaviors. This is a level of accountability. If you're the leader, am I open to differing points of view? Am I demonstrating accessibility or humility? And humility in a leader, sometimes I always like to joke that humility is one thing they don't teach in business school. And because they're focused on the skills necessary to run your business. But humility is so important. Humility is may be perceived from on the outside, oh, that's a weakness. And actually, it's a great strength. Why is it a strength? Because the leader is sharing of himself and herself. Humility begins with saying something very practical. I don't have all the answers, but you know what? I think the people in this room do. And together gets to our final step, which is the open work spirit. We'll figure this out. This is how we'll do it. And great leaders pull people together. And especially now that we're in times of crisis, we need all of us pulling together to to create solutions and forge our way forward, and for our business and in our lives and in our culture and our society. We're all in this great enterprise right now, which is called creating the new normal. None of us know what the new normal is, but we're all in an effort of creating it. And the new normal will require a level of trust. Okay. Trust behaviors, you have to define it. You list the obstacles to it. What do you do first? You itemize your action steps and you ensure accountability. So what this is things work. As an executive coach, I work with people who have coaching goals, and we always make them very specific, and we have tactical behaviors, tactical actions that will help them achieve that. And this is the same thing with trust. So define what a trust behavior is. What's the obstacle? Why can't I achieve this? Is it institutional? Is it a colleague? Is it my boss? What's holding me back? Is it our culture? And what would be the first example of doing something, doing first? Ideally, I like to say become the example we want others to be. Now that I'm borrowing that, of course, from Gandhi and other great thinkers. And then we itemize our action steps and we ensure that we move forward in this endeavor. And again, we come back to communicate, communicate, communicate. Without communication, people are left in a lurch. And essential to communication, remember, of course, it's not a one-way street. It's listening and learning. And what do I mean by that? It's listening to what other people say and going out of your way to listen to contrary points of view. Because sometimes we can all get wrapped up on our own silos and we'll think, oh, I'm not, this isn't, I know Sally's going to say this, or I know John's going to say that, so I'm just going to ignore that. Well, you're in a leadership position. You really can't do that. You have to listen. And you have to learn from what you hear. And also, and especially now, listen for what you don't hear. So when you're talking about, how a project is going or not going, how engaged are people? What's their level of enthusiasm? Do they have the resource to do the job? So listen for that, they do tell you, but also for what you don't hear. And that's all part of the communication enterprise. And it all leads to higher levels of trust. Communicate, ask questions. Ask questions, again, with an open mind and an open heart. When you ask questions as if you're a prosecuting attorney, where were you on the date of X? Then you put people on the defensive. So you ask questions about, tell me about, how is this going? Explain this to me. And when a superior, by superior, I don't mean an humanity, but a superior in the time of rank, a boss versus an employee. When the boss asks these kind of questions and does it with an open-heartedness, an open-mindedness, then people will rally and say, they'll be forthcoming and give straightforward answers. So next, for trust, you have to be decisive. There's an old saying about analysis paralysis. None of us like that because, and then also the other thing about information, and this is relevant to communication, it just goes into a black hole. I tell my boss something, he seems interested at the moment, but then I don't hear anything else. There's no follow-up, there's no feedback. So be decisive about the information that you have and make decisions. That fosters trust. Influence is essential to trust. What will you accomplish? Good leaders use their influence for positive. How will you make positive change? And leaders don't do it by themselves. And this, going back to trust, you need the support and the activity and the buy-in to other people. So it's essential to work on that. Most importantly, and I think I'll leave it here with this presentation, show that you care. And let people know you have their back. We're all going through very different stages right now. And I did a recent piece with a colleague of mine, Carol Kaufman, excuse me. She's at Harvard and runs the Institute, is a founder of the Institute of Coaching. And I interviewed her on the topic of grief because right now we're all feeling a degree of loss. And so how do we deal with that loss? And all of it, as Carol pointed out to me, we're all feeling it in different ways. But what a leader needs to do is acknowledge that grief is real. And grief takes many forms, of course. Obviously, we know it when we lose someone, a loved one, through death, and we're experiencing a lot of death, sadly, in the COVID epidemic. But there's a different kind of loss, too, and that's the loss of our workplace. Some of our colleagues are no longer with us, and so we're feeling their loss. And even if they're with us, they're not with us physically anymore. And so there's that loss there. And that's, again, it's okay to grieve for that. It's a normal human reaction. If you don't grieve for it, you don't process it. And if you don't process it, then you can't adjust to it. And there's another kind of grief, and that's loss of identity. And my colleague Cynthia Burnham, who was on the show earlier, talks about my future identity in the sense of what I wanted to become. And I had these plans, I had these aspirations, but now with COVID or the pandemic, I'm in an upside down world. I don't know if I'm going to be able to fulfill that. Well, that's an issue. Again, it has to be dealt with. So leaders need to be responsive to understanding where people are in the spectrum of grief, but also in the spectrum of how their engagement. And essentially, trust gets down to engagement. The data that I showed you from Edelman about Corona in the workplace and the trust I'm talking about now, all combine to give us a perspective on engagement. And when trust levels go down, then people feel less engaged. Why? Because they feel it doesn't matter. If you don't trust your boss, you don't trust your CEO, then why am I doing what I'm doing? Well, it comes down to I'm doing what I'm doing for a paycheck, okay? But my sense of commitment erodes. I become compliant, but I lack commitment. So let's close it out on that note today. Thank you. This was an experiment for me to try and share some new ideas with you without a guest. I'll be back the next time, and we'll have another exciting guest who will illuminate our situation. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Till next time.